So it's a divisive time, and all of us as business leaders are feeling attacked or vulnerable or fearful on some level of ending up on the wrong side in the culture wars. Maybe not the wrong side even, but just a side that some people begin to see us negatively, and it impacts our ability to serve our customers. So I want to share with you some insights from a book I read recently, because I think it can help us to position ourselves positively in a world that appears to be increasingly polarized. This is A Post-Truth World by Ken Wilber. It's the latest in a long series of books he's written in which he lays out an archetype of human development. This archetype applies both to individuals as they move through their life cycle, and it also applies to, he argues, societies as they progress from primitive understandings of reality to more advanced understandings of reality. Now, it's easy to critique this theory. I'd be happy to give you my top 10 critiques of it, but still I think it's a helpful framework. What he did is he started looking at the theories of development from psychology, from religion, from various cultural traditions around the world, and he found that there's commonalities among or between each of the stages that these theories of development see people as moving through. And so by looking at these commonalities, he develops archetypes of human development. He helpfully or unhelpfully color codes them according to the colors of the rainbow, which is the ones that we'll move through. So I'll just quickly explain some of the major stages, then show how that applies to the way that we position ourselves in the world as people, as leaders, as brands. So the first stage I want to talk about is color-coded red. That's the egocentric stage. Early in our life, we learn to develop a theory of our own selves. And we need to construct an ego. We need to have ego integrity in order to survive in the world. That's an important part of development. Of course, you have entire societies that are in this stage or dominated by the thinking in this stage, and it can be described as magical. Magic, of course, is power that's connected to an individual, connected to a will, and power that we don't understand in any other rational way other than there is a self that is doing a thing. So this is also referred to as a magical stage. From the magical stage, we move to the mythic stage, which now is ethnocentric because there is a shared understanding of how reality operates. There is a mythic structure. There's often hierarchies. There are different examples that I could give of societies or people moving from the egocentric to the ethnocentric stage. In evangelical Christendom, this is often the way that we conceptualize being saved. You move from being driven by your own ego needs, the desires of self, to being driven by what the community and God says is acceptable. And so that transition is from an egocentric to an ethnocentric worldview. Also, if you look at Babylonian literature, the Epic of Gilgamesh is very much magical, very much driven by these personalities, and it's hard to see a lot of mythic structure. It's there, but it's harder to see. Whereas when you get to the Enuma Elish, this is very much a defense of why reality and politics is structured in a certain way. And so there's much more of a symbolic coherence to the Enuma Elish that you don't find. It's more difficult to locate in the Epic of Gilgamesh. You could give lots of other examples, but I think that gives you a sense of the ethnocentric stage, or amber. Of course, many people, many societies, the vast majority, I would say, around the world still exists within this state today. There's nothing wrong with it. It's actually a way of limiting the violence and the dysfunction that we have when people are in red or even in prior stages. However, from the ethnocentric stage, which is about us, first person plural pronoun, we move to orange, or the world-centric stage. And this is where rationality comes to the fore. So if you look at the world around you, this is the world that was built by orange. We're looking for rules now that apply to everyone. So classic liberal thinking. We're looking for systems that can be spread all around the world, such as democracy, free markets, things that we think if we apply this to everyone everywhere, then things would get better. So this rationalistic world is one that has been in the water and really has been ruling things through most of the 1800s and the 1900s, but then began to collapse in the 60s and 70s as we moved into a post-rational or postmodern world. Now, of course, these transitions take a long time, both within an individual. They can happen over the course of years or in the course of a moment or one Shroom's trip when you make a transition into a higher level of consciousness, presumably. At least some people think of it that way. But even in one given society, they can take decades or generations to unfold. In the 60s and 70s, we start to see orange people look beyond this rationalistic world to a postmodern world. Wilber describes this as green. This is moving into a more compassionate and inclusive model where truth is fluid and there's a lot of hybridization, that we're blurring the boundaries between categories. And if you look at the progressive left today, which is what Wilber does largely in this book, The Post-Truth World, you can see that this is the philosophy of life that is coming to the fore. Now, just a brief detour on Wilber's argument in this particular book, and that is that green has become fairly dysfunctional. So he says the problem with being in the green category, the postmodern way of thinking, is that you don't believe that ranking is good. You don't believe that there should be hierarchies. Yet at the same time, you have this sense, which he would say is the correct sense, that you are at the top of the hierarchy. You are at the latest stage of development. And so you rank higher than other people. And so that contradiction is something that hasn't been resolved. And he says green would have an opportunity to figure out how to include all of these stages, because each stage is not just supposed to be moving on. These are all aspects of human existence. The next stage should transcend and include all of the prior stages. And that's consistent with literature across the theories of development from various different traditions, this transcend and include view of prior stages. But he says green isn't doing that. They're failing to lead. They're seeing all at the ethnocentric worldview, even the rationalistic worldview, and certainly the egocentric worldview as a disease and evil, labeling things as hate speech and trying to literally pass laws against prior stages. He says that's like trying to pass a law against being 5. Now, if you've hung around with 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds, you might think that that's a good idea. But if we need our societies and our individuals to develop, then we need these later stages to develop inclusive and compassionate ways to help each stage move into its best expression and then be there until an individual or a group is ready to start developing the characteristics of the later stages. So where do we go from here? Where do we go in a world that is split right down the middle between green-dominated politics and culture and red-amber dominated politics and culture? Meanwhile, and I would say probably a lot of the people listening to me on LinkedIn, business leaders are running things within an orange mindset, regardless of where they are personally. That orange mindset is still how a lot of things in the world are run, or how we conceptualize the way they're run, which could be two different things. So how do we position ourselves? Well, he says that there could be a later stage, and that's what he wants to see emerge now. That's what he calls integrative, when it's going to be teal, of course, as we move the visible spectrum. And this is something that learns to integrate all things and be able to simultaneously draw from structured views of reality, rational views of reality, egocentric views of reality, inclusive views of reality, and incorporate that into a wise way of being. Now, the idea that this is just emerging now and is new, I think is wrong. And that would be one of the major flaws that I would point out in his overall framework. In a sense, I say, hey, Ken Wilber, congratulations, you just invented wisdom. But nonetheless, wisdom is what we need. I think he's right there. I think we need the wisdom to know how we can both reach out to people, help them understand who we are, and help them understand that we are here to help them move into their best self. Whatever stage they're in, we are here to help them on that journey. How do we do this as brands? Well, I want to give you an example of a way not to do it. And that's, don't go all in on any one stage. If you need to make a statement, that's right. I mean, if you need to sell pillows to red stage people, then make a red stage or an amber stage company, and that's fine. At the same time, if you want to appeal to the broad spectrum of the population, you can use your own wisdom to combine these. If you look at a website, you can quickly see if this was put together by someone with green in mind. Remember, green, the values are hybridization, inclusivity, fluidity, and so you'll see a lot of blended colors, oranges, greens, very far away from primary colors, color gradients, fluidity, swirls. These are things that just scream, hey, we're progressive. And not just what you say, it's also all of the ways that your brand presents itself in the world gives an impression on people. So that's fine. And again, if you need to make that statement, or if that's the population that you're appealing to, then that might be important. But there's also ways that you can combine this, and that you can create structure, that you can create some hard edges. You can have some symbols or some language that help people who are in a red or an amber stage, or people in green who are feeling anxious and need some sense of stability. There's something within your brand and your presentation that's going to call out to them. So that's just an example of how we can use wisdom to be truly integrative, rather than staking our entire identities as a company, as a leader, entire careers on picking one of the generations. So that's really the takeaway. All of you are wise people, you're leaders, you can learn wisdom, you have wisdom. The takeaway, in short, is just you don't need to go all in on one of these generations. Learn how you can truly appreciate people who are at each stage, that you can see the strengths that that aspect of existence has to offer everyone, and then make a commitment that what you do in the world is going to help people accomplish that. It's going to help people become the best version of the stage that they're in, and then be ready when it's time to move to the next stage. So that is a summary of Ken Wilber's overall framework, its application in the post-truth world, and I hope a couple of key takeaways that you can apply to your own business and your own life.